Thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure.
It's you're in this studio, which is good.
Yeah, new one. I like it too.
We're going to discuss everything Perth property market.
I had a phone call on Christmas Day being like, hey, look, we're interested in that property again.
And if you get a loan of $1 million, you'll probably end up paying $1 million worth of interest as well.
If you go into the grocery store and there's 20 people buying milk and there's one bottle of milk left, it's that competition. It's like the fear of missing out is coming back into the market.
When you're on realestate.com and you're just constantly clicking refresh and nothing's coming up. Welcome back to another episode of That Backyard Property Pod. Today we have another expert. We've had him on before, the first return guest, director, buyer's agent, and expert, Rowen Powell, Verve Property.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure.
It's you're in this studio, which is good.
Yeah, new one. I like it too.
Yeah, it's more vibrant, and today is going to be a good day. We're going to discuss everything Perth property market, and who better to get in than Rowen Powell.
There's a lot to discuss. It's a very interesting landscape at the moment. I think the Perth market. There's a lot of subjects and topics we'll probably touch on, but I think the first and foremost is probably just the sheer lack of stock. At the moment, I think we've got 4,100 properties, and that's from all the way from Alkimos all the way down to Mandurah, and that's houses, apartment, land, and we're losing about 20% per week.
What do we usually sit at?
When a market's normally in equilibrium, we're normally like 13, 14,000, ideally 12 around there, just as enough transactions to occur. So, yeah, some suburbs are seeing one property per few months, and as you're probably aware as well, with all your buyer demand and people coming through, that there's more than one person missing out each time. So, yeah, it's a pretty difficult landscape to kind of work through, and like just little things like it's taken 12 days for the medium sale time frame, which is the quickest we've ever had since we started recording that data in 1994 as well. So, and we've almost got the lowest stock we've ever had since we recorded in 1985. So there's these things that are contributing to the fact that it's a very tightly held market.
It's funny because the last time we caught up on the podcast was in November, December, and it was when we were talking about buyer fatigue and everyone gone through 2024 and they were just a bit over the market. And now we're back in the position we probably were 12 months ago, if not a little bit more aggressive after a few rate cuts as well. You've obviously seen all those buyers that were fatigued kind of come back with a vengeance.
Oh, 100%. So like things that weren't selling in December, they relaunched them in January and they were selling for in excess of the asking price. And then you're starting to see the market that it was once in like 2021, essentially post-COVID, before that rate rise, when there was a very aggressive market. But we had more properties back then. So then you had a bit more of a choice, whereas at the moment it's almost like you reverse the buyer fatigue to buyer frustration because there's not enough there. There's obviously the confidence of rates being reduced, and that's still not playing enough effect to create more housing and more solutions for these buyers out there.
There's a part of this that reminds me of old school Tinder, where when you're on realestate.com and you're just constantly clicking refresh and nothing's coming up. And when you're on Tinder in the early days in Darwin and you click refresh, there was nothing coming up. So it reminds me a lot of that, because all the buyers we're helping at the moment, they're just sitting on realestate.com like every other buyer, and there's just no new stock.
No, and if it does come, it might even sell beforehand as well, and that's even the hardest part, or it's selling pretty quickly and you're not understanding, and if you're not in the market enough or seeing everything, that's where I'm finding people are missing out because they can't determine value. Like between one sale, for example, if it's in Wembley, something sells for 2.6 and there's 6 buyers that missed out, and something else comes up for 2.6, it's selling for 2.8 because someone in Floriet's missed out. Now they need to buy something, they've got a bigger budget. And you're always just spinning your wheels, and you're just not quite understanding how you're not getting into the market.
It's a really interesting place. And the strange part is I felt like we were here before, but it just feels a little bit different again.
Yeah, it's just such a low stock environment, and that's probably it's a lot of pent up frustration from buyers because there's a significant buyer demand. and there's also probably a gap in the market what sellers want for their property and what buyers are prepared to pay. And there's a lot of, because you've got to remember, sellers are buyers as well. So for them to sell the house, and there's a lot of people upgrading, they need a number for that to make sense, because that top end as well is asking a premium. So it's increasing each price point you're going up. So it's a significant log jam between what a buyer sees where seller sees value. But the buyers that are buying also might have their entry point villa they want to upgrade to Mount Hawthorn for $2 million. They're also doing the same factor on their villa. So it's like people will sell if they got the price because they need that price in order to buy the next property. And it's just, it's a bit of a, it's not great for a lot of people at the moment.
Logjam's a really good way to put it. It's a really good way to put it.
Oh, and it's probably, obviously to talk about interest rates being cut, and that's spurred on more of this demand as well. And obviously it's just confidence, and there's not a lack of transactions. So we've got 4,100 properties, like I mentioned. There's not enough transactions occurring to provide enough confidence that the market is moving in a certain direction. Yeah, prices are going up, but people are afraid maybe that's just a once-off price, because it might be 3 months for another house to come, and then they sit in their hands for 3 months and the market moves again. So it's like asking someone to jump first at the moment, and also understand that probably where the seller's expectation doesn't align where the buyers are.
And I guess those sellers also probably need a price point to be able to get into the next point that they're looking at as well. So they can't actually accept anything less, possibly because of where they're trying to get to.
Yeah, and it's like little things like pricing an asset at the moment. So like you got the land value appeal, but there's a more weighted towards house value, like the build quality and the build value, whereas it hadn't been so much, because obviously building's such a difficult subject to understand where pricing is, because there's no fixed contracts. The feasibilities are all over the shop. So then when you're trying to buy something, you've got to factor in the house as well as the land. And the house might have zero value whatsoever, but to replace it, you still have to pay something. And then that's the hard thing to see through. And sellers might love that house and they might have emotional connection, but the buyer doesn't. So that's also a bit of a fighting topic as well.
So hard. I guess if we took a step back, why are we in this predicament? In Perth in particular?
Sheer quality of stock and lack of stock. Obviously, since like 2013, 2014, we had an oversupply of property. You probably remember that market. Everyone thought it was the next Perth boom in a sense. And we had too many properties. We had about 18,000, 19,000. And what happened was we had a really reactive government, essentially, and we decreased dwelling approvals by 200% year on year from that date. And what's happened is that obviously we've gained more people. Interstate migration's been low, but the airport arrivals, our wage growth has been supported and very strong. So what's happened is we haven't built enough. We're earning more money, but we're gaining more people, and it's putting a pressure on a good quality asset. And obviously throw in COVID in that and the lifestyle appeal. Obviously I specialise in the home buying space, so people don't want to live in apartments. They don't want to live in high density. They want to live in a quiet street, somewhere that's close by, cafes, beach, whatever it is, whereas that's really taken off. And even like the workforce as well, working from home a lot more, the need to go into city, public transport, all these things have kind of changed the landscape that we weren't anticipating, and it's created a bit of confusion probably for a lot of people in that sense. It's just we haven't built enough as well.
I guess, how do we get out of this position as well? Or can you just see this being quite a long runway that you don't really know where the end is? Yeah,
it's interesting because like obviously I've been doing it for like 8 years, and I see things that I went through 8 years ago or 5 years ago, and now they're worth, like I went through them at 960 and they're worth 2. And you start to go, well, geez, that's really moved.
Geez, I wish I bought that.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot, trust me. But then I do really well for your clients, but obviously you're buying their home, so they're going to live there for a lot of cycles. The runway, it's an interesting one because it's going to be determinant on where people start to tap out. Like we've got interest rates to be reduced, their borrowing capacities are going to hit a ceiling. But it's also going to be a part where people start becoming uncomfortable, and how much debt do people really want to start to take on. Like if you start talking Like there's a house that recently sold in Mount Hawthorn for 3, another one selling for 3.5. Is now the mortgage on that one going to be the average 2 to 2.5? What does that look like? You have to what's that, $400,000 combined essentially, if not more. So you're going to be starting to get to a point where it's like how far is our wage growth, and also like the borrowing capacity is going to come in.
Yeah, it does. And we were just doing the numbers before, and previously, so in the last 24 months, you could borrow 5 times your gross annual income. And with these 2 rate cuts and the additional one expected in July and then probably one later in the year, it's now 6 times your annual gross income. Pre-COVID, it was about 7 to 8 times. So it's quite amazing that the difference in that borrowing capacity does change what people are willing to pay. But also, now they know that rates aren't going up. And so what a lot of the conversations were in the last couple of years was, I'm comfortable at this amount, but if it goes up again, I'm just not comfortable. Whereas now I'm comfortable at that amount, and if it goes down, I'm even in a better position. The issue I see is that you have to pay this thing back.
Yeah.
And if you get a loan of $1 million, you'll probably end up paying $1 million worth of interest as well. So you're paying $2 million back for the $1 million that you've borrowed. And I think people kind of lose sight of what they actually have to pay back.
Yeah, and it's like it's just back to having more stock and more transactions, because the problem is that there's more than 6 people that miss out each time, and then they're going to go even harder next time. And if the rates keep going down, they've got the firepower and the ammo. And the reason for them living there is because they want to live there for 10, 20, 30 years. The investor space is dropping down in Perth. It's more the home buyers. I'm starting to see people, eastern states, investors sell that asset to go back to Melbourne for whatever reason, because obviously that market.
Interesting.
And it's more the home buyers, the mums and dads trying to get in as well. So it's fueled by emotion as well. And to live in an area close to your parents, and because of all these things that have occurred, it's something that, can you put a price on it? It gets to a point, and I'm seeing throughout the market that people just get fed up and pay a huge price. Like the stuff that I'm seeing that maybe was worth 4, and they put 4.5 to get it done. They don't want to think about it again, because for them they're not moving for another 30 years. And that's the mentality that I'm starting to see, and that's probably what's going to start to happen, I think, especially if rates come down. There's more confidence, but the hard part is sellers' expectations and where that sits, and obviously the information they're being fed and what their house is worth is always tough, because it's bloody hard to value at the moment. Like, you think about how many transactions occur in a certain space, and unless you're in a very high turnover area, there might be one sale with 12 to 18 months difference that's a comparable property, and you're meant to work off 3 to 6 month data. So you're establishing market value by what you do, but you also don't know what else it's sitting. So yeah, and imagine that the average buyer trying to figure that out. Like, each time they look at something, it's going up by $400,000, $500,000.
Yeah, I'm finding it impossible. And knowing like the background that I have previously in real estate as well, and the way that you'd value a property was a valuer's logic, where you find a comparable sale that's inferior, similar, and superior, and you're working within those parameters. Whenever clients that don't use a buyer's agent ask for a little bit of that advice, which I can give a tiny bit of, I'm not finding any comparable sales to match the price point that they're needing to pay for these properties. So all of a sudden you lose, like as you said, you lose concept of what value is.
And it's like, you got to understand where like offers are. So for example, if something sells for 5, but everyone, the offer that bought it was 5, but everyone's at 4.5, and that person's just overpaid to get into the market. Is that market value, or is the buyer pool still 4.5? And people go, well, geez, they've overpaid. Maybe these guys have been looking for 18 months. Instead of that fatigue, it's now frustration. That's changed, and you're starting to see that, and they're just like, I've had enough. But that props the price point of that suburb up, and it might not be a real price point, and then everyone else goes around that thinks it's in that street and in that suburb, it's now worth 5. It's now, my house is now worth 5.5, but it's propped up on someone's fueled emotions. And how do you contemplate that? And that's why we need more houses, more transactions, because it'll level out all the buyers as well, and it'll actually level out where sellers' houses are meant to be, because it's like anything. If you go into the grocery store and there's 20 people buying milk and there's one bottle of milk left, everyone's going to be, it's like toilet paper all over again in COVID. Like, let's think about, like, it's that competition. It's like the fear of missing out is coming back into the market. That is going to be the biggest obstacle for every buyer at the moment, because they're like, I just don't want to miss out.
Feels a bit like monopoly money when you're saying, well, it was at 4.5 and now it's 5. You know, well, that's still 500 grand.
Correct. Yeah, but that's the thing. And different people's circumstances are different, but not every buyer knows that unless you have the intel and the information. And it's just a market that has completely lacks transparency. There is none. It is a lot of smoke and mirrors, I think is probably a good way of putting it, because the information that everyone's probably getting is probably 3 to 6 months out anyway. And it's not up to date. It's not on the ground. It's not things that are occurring and you're going through properties. And like the quality is poor. So like the statistics they went through, like City Beach went down in like the median price point. It's because the quality of assets were poor that sold, because people that have a premium property, you're going to have to pay a premium price. And people aren't prepared to pay that. So it's so skewed of understanding. And so everyone's kind of got no idea, but all the idea at the same time. It's really strange. Like, everyone thinks they know what's going on, but it's like, well, actually, we're probably going to be in the next 6 months a very aggressive market that unless people start to sell and find the place they want to buy, it's going to get tighter and tighter. And like I said, if we're losing 20% of stock per week and we're going to drop under a certain number, it's going to be like, well, yeah, they're buying this today, or there's nothing coming up for 8 months.
Yeah, and where's the value then in 8 months? You just don't know.
You don't know, and that's the concern, and that's probably where I'm starting to see people shift their mindset and going, okay, what is it that I want? Is it the location? Is that what matters most to me? Because that's the quality asset. That's what I'm determining. And people are going back to buying more like land value assets, because they're like, the premium on the price on the house is too much. Like, yes, it's finished, but it's also emotion, but then you've also got to get them to go somewhere. So it's, yeah, how long the runway is, it's going to be dependent on when buyers start to cap out and feel uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah, which I truly thought was last year. Yeah. Like at the end of last year, I thought we were hitting that price point. As you mentioned, Perth has such a high level of income versus over east, especially outside of Sydney. Yeah. And so the median price has increased with that income. And I just don't know at what point do you say, well, I'm not comfortable with that debt, even though I can borrow 6 times my income. Yeah. Let's say you're on 200K combined income and you're borrowing 1.2 mil. Are you actually comfortable with that debt?
Well, like the average wage, like how much you pay per mortgage and stuff. You think about Sydney, what was it, got to like 80% like average pay to your mortgage? Yeah,
well, so in terms of on that front, it was getting close to 50%. Yeah. So 50% of what was coming in was going out to your mortgage, and so that's in Sydney it sits between sort of 40 and 45%. Yeah. In Perth, it was traditionally around 30 to 35%.
Correct.
And that is creeping ever so close to 40.
But then if rates come down but then the price point's coming up, they're kind of like fighting each other. Yeah. So that's what I mean. It's going to get to a point where people start going, 50% of my wage is going to my house. Is that worth it?
Well, especially depending on where the wage is. If the wage is based on the mining industry, which a lot of our economy is, are you going to be on that 250K package for the next 30 years whilst you've got this large debt?
Yeah, it's going to be but you're saying in like the rental market, I know it's a different market, but people start to cap out at certain prices. Like, I'm not paying that. Like, that's ridiculous for what I need. And then it's like living within your means as well. It's depending on people's circumstances and mindset where that's going to continue to go. Like, some people would be like, okay, I want to live within my means. This is what I'm comfortable with. But some people are like, oh, this is what I want to do. I'm more risk adverse. I'll push the envelope more, knowing that maybe the return's greater. I get a better product, and this is what I'm going to do. So it's dependent on that. And then the people that aren't risk adverse are just getting caught behind, because they're like, oh, it should sell for this. It should stop. We were fatigued. We saw the market slow down. We expected it. And then Jan 6, I think we messaged each other, and I was like, house I was trying to buy was 2.4 and now it's 2.6. and it was 2 weeks over Christmas. Like my phone was ringing I had a phone call on Christmas Day, being like, "Hey, look, we're interested in that property again." And it's because people had time to think, and now it's going to get to a point where there's no stock. We've got more confidence, and people are going to have too much time to think because there's nothing out there. It's going to fuel this desire about fear of missing out, seeing things that sell, and just like, you know what, like I've had enough. Let's just get it done.
Do you think there's an element to, obviously that fear of missing out is there, but the element to, do you actually need to upsize? Like the property you're in right now, do you actually need to move to a different location or upsize? And what sort of reasons are you seeing? Obviously outgrowing a home because of family, schooling, I'm guessing is another big one. And I guess probably being closer to family is probably the three that I would see generally.
Yeah, and it depends where they're coming from. So a lot of the time it is like family, schooling, and that environment close to work, because sometimes like things are changing. People aren't going to the city. Might be more like practices and stuff like that. And it's also like understanding that the some price points in certain suburbs. So some suburbs are going faster than others. So like your Mount Hawthorns are flying, whereas your Peppermint Groves are a little bit slower. And not that you're going to get a Mount Hawthorn to Peppy, but sometimes you're seeing people look at that and go, I know that's a really good long-term investment, and understanding that maybe I could never have got into this suburb before because the difference between those price points was massive. Like we're talking but that top end is a little bit slower. So like, well, maybe if I'm getting into this now and I can understand, I can see where the market's going, this is probably a better investment for my family long term. And that's what I'm starting to see, is those people that are going are like, you know what, do I think the market's capped at the suburb I'm in? Would someone pay $4 million for my suburb, whereas someone will pay $4 million for the other suburb? And it happens for every other suburb that's outside. And it's interesting, like the exterior suburbs have been like propped up because the ones that are in the blue chip haven't sold enough. Mm-hmm. But then it's like, ones, if they start to sell, what happens to these external ones as well? That's going to be the question.
What are some of the suburbs that you're seeing in both camps? And I guess from a context perspective, I'm seeing a few contracts around that $2 million mark in Corrine and Duncraig, which paying $2 million in those suburbs you wouldn't have thought about 5 to 10 years ago, and now that is the case, and you would have expected to pay $2 million in Floreat, for example. Yep. Floreat is still tightly held, but what are some of those suburbs that you're seeing across Perth?
It's just the ones that are more tightly held, and for their reasons, for like there might be an older demographic and they're not changing over. Whereas Corrine, and it'd be the buyer pool that's in there and the age. So Corrine, Duncraig, these areas are a lot younger, and people are upgrading and understanding that that's probably the environment. Whereas it's the mindset of probably the older generations, like, I'm going to hold on to this asset until I die, and I'll die on my hill before I sell this house. And that's what's happening. So the turnover is so low, whereas everyone's like, the buyers in Duncraig, Corrine, and the sellers aren't risk averse and are quickly transacting. So like the difference, like you're paying land value in Floreat for like 2 to 2.3, right? And if you go through like the 30-year compounded growth rates, and obviously the past few years in Corrine, Duncraig being ridiculous, but the median price in Duncraig and Corrine used to be like $760. That was 5 years ago, yeah. And now it's massively crept up. Whereas Floreat's moved, but not by the same amount. But then you're like, well, how many transactions are occurring? And then you see something that sells for 2.6, 2.7 for land, and then things start to move, and it's just a huge jump to the next, because it's more of a, yeah, that makes sense. Whereas I think we'll get to a point where it's like, I'm paying $3 million for Corrine, Duncraig, does that make sense? And I think that's the mindset that's going to be the real difficult equation for a lot of buyers.
Yeah, and there's going to be an element for someone paying the premium now, and it will be worth less than what they buy it for today at some point in time, yeah. Maybe. What is, in terms of, let's say Floreat, like what are the number of transactions that you would see in some of these suburbs if they're being so tightly held?
Well, it could be like 3 or 4 a month, depending on what it is. Like a $3 million product, right? That's probably like what everyone, like that still needs work in Floreat. So that's like, there's one coming up. There's a few I know off market, obviously, but no one else knows that. But there might be one, and the last time there was one, it was 3-4 weeks ago. It's like one a month, essentially. And then so again, buyers move from one case to the other, but that house isn't perfect for them. So then like there's more of a buyer pool. So you start to go, it's very low turnover. But then what happens is, like I said at the start, it's just the pendulum swings and people just get to the point that they're frustrated. It's not fatigue anymore. I think we can probably change that to frustration. And it's about who's holding their nerve more, but understanding that the quality of that asset probably isn't the greatest either. Like that's something that I'm seeing, is that the quality of properties is not great, but they're still getting a great price. And that's something that I like is a huge dilemma for me, because it's I obviously look after the best interest of the client, and it's like, well, this property selling here for 3, it's not quite the quality, but then sells for 3.3. So now that quality property is maybe 3.8. Do you have that budget? And you have to be on the ball within that weekend, or understanding that, okay, that's the price now, we've got to move, or else you're chasing a unicorn essentially.
I didn't really think about that in the context of your role within this, because traditionally a buyer's agent would be someone who would negotiate for you and deal with the agent, also obviously finding the right property and a quality asset, but the level of negotiation is somewhat limited, where you're just trying to actually secure the property, not necessarily try and bring down a price, just get a price.
Well, you've got to justify the price. Okay. I think that's the hardest part, and I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. So and the reason why I like at Verve, the model is like market specialisation. So I know everything that's going on. I know where the buyer pool is. I know where offers were on that property. If the next one's 200 grand, not at the time, obviously post it, and you're asking the right questions. So you understand, and I'm taking my clients through 4 or 5 properties that don't exist. And I'm like, well, when this one goes to market, sold for 3.1, we could have bought it for 2.9 or whatever it is. And you've got accurate representation of market feedback for that day, for that present day. So you're in front of every buyer. But you've also got to go back to make sure it's a quality property, because there's no point going all in on something if I think there's something better. And that's something I've got to be really careful of. And a lot of the time, like, I'm probably more renowned for saying no to something, but still getting my client into the market, because the longer I take, the more I cost my client. But also the quality of asset is what costs me long term if it doesn't perform. So you've got to, it's like a balance in action of being like, okay, you don't want to be bullish, but you still want to be somewhat aggressive in your approach to make sure you're not missing anything and you're paying a reasonable price. And it's also what they love, and the quality's there for long term. They don't have to think about something going wrong.
Yeah. It's a hard one. I was just thinking about it was fatigue. Now it's frustration. What's that next F word that it's going to be?
Oh, I think we all know it. It's probably on the tip of our tongue, and I think it's pretty close. And it's building up that way. Like the buyer demand that I'm getting through the doors, and obviously buyers agents are becoming a bit more common, in particular. It's a lot of hurt and pain at the moment, and that's fueling that frustration. And I don't think it will go back to the fatigue model. I think it's just getting to the point of like people are just have had enough, and they need help. I think that's the biggest thing I'm seeing at the moment. And any way they can get their way forward, that's what they're looking for at the moment.
And are you seeing that people are just not willing to compromise on the type of property or the location?
And I think that's key. I think that's good. And people are still astute. So there's buyers out there, but like I said, it's whoever gets frustrated first. Like if something is compromised, people aren't going to pay for it, right? Like that's rule number one. And the buyers that have been in the market for a while now, if you've seen the market go up and you're like, I've cost myself 600 grand, I'm not going to go just buy something that's going to cost me another 600 grand when I go sell it. So they're more astute and they're more understanding. Yeah, there's frustration, but it's like, first and foremost, it's quality, like no main roads, nothing that's compromised. The simple things, which people forget when they're home buying because they fall in love and they ignore everything else. It's the red flag. It's your Tinder back in Darwin. Like you've got 2 options. You fall in love with one of them because that's the only option, right? So then you've got to pull yourself back and be like, okay, why am I buying this? What are the consequences if I buy this property? Does it suit what I'm after? Because not everyone's going to get exactly what they want, and that's something that people need to know. You've got to buy the best quality asset that you can at this present time and be comfortable knowing that what else is out there is covered off as well.
If you have to buy.
If you have to buy, yes. Yeah.
Luckily for the Tinder in Darwin, I just imported my now wife from Sydney. So that was the way around it. So there's no importing property in Perth.
Oh, God, we need it. We need it, definitely.
Yeah, I don't really know where this will go. And obviously from our end, it's facilitating the lending. And I think one concern I'm starting to have is that previously most banks would do a full valuation to determine market value, and they would then not approve the loan at a certain amount based on that valuation. Most banks now will just accept contract price, or they'll do a desktop or computer valuation, and they'll just accept that as what it is. And so I'm not saying that that's the wrong thing to do, but I think that there's a level of accountability within it that the valuers are probably not getting the chance to provide their opinion on that property after the contract's been signed.
Yeah, like if there's 6 offers on a house that's lacking quality, like the valuers are not going to be like, well, I don't think this is an inferior asset, but there's 6 offers, like, and they're all around the same range. So it's like, good luck trying to overturn that. You'd be like, okay, you're not going to get finance. And who's going to say the person underneath is just going to be like, all right, we'll waive finance, we'll just figure something out because it's just going to make it work.
Because there will be a bank that does value it at that price.
Correct.
So, especially if they're doing computer values, but if they weren't, there'd still be a bank that does it because NAB and ANZ do curbside where there's a drive-by, whatever. There's ways around it, but I've definitely seen a huge drop in valuations ordered for contracts.
Yeah, and then it's even in the market, people aren't doing finance. It's just fake cash, essentially, or cash, which is still financed. But it's a changing landscape as well, and that's probably what's going to... That's the market that we're in. People are trying to be as competitive as they possibly can and shorten everything and make it work. And you and the banks are at the mercy of that, of trying to make it work. And I think that's probably what they've had to do. Yeah,
definitely. And the conditions, I guess buyers are so focused on the price and what they're going to offer, but they lack the knowledge around what else is going to strengthen their offer. Yeah. And a larger deposit used to be preferable, but it's not. Doesn't really mean much now. But the finance terms, as you said, the fake cash offer and the settlement period, and especially on my end, the advice is the seller is selling for a reason, and they're either selling because they need to move into somewhere quickly and they've got bridging finance, which is now really common, or they haven't found anywhere and they need a long settlement to then give them a period to find the next home, which, as we've spoken about, could take time.
Ages. And then the people that we're dealing with on that flip side, right? So the sellers that need to buy something that is the upgraded stock are older. And then the markets they've transacted in are completely different to the markets we are in right now, and how quick they move, the lack of stock. And they probably could have gotten away with like a long settlement. And it's like, oh yeah, there's 100 houses in this, I can find something. Whereas they don't quite realise and understand that next phase is difficult. And it's also the fact that they might be downsizing from that bigger home, but the downsize is the same price as that bigger home. And then so that throws another curveball at them. They go, what? I've got 1,000 square metres in Mosman Park, but I'm downsizing to a new build on 350, 400 for the same price. How does that work? And that's the hard part that I think a lot of people are struggling with as well. So, yeah, it's probably going to get a lot harder, I imagine. It's going to get a lot more competitive. Obviously, over winter as well, it's a lack of stock notoriously. Obviously, real estate's seasonal. So you're going to factor in that a lot of people are probably away in Europe at the moment, getting a nice tan, and we're not, probably getting paler. And they're going away and they're not thinking about property, but then they're going to come back and there's going to be a bit more of a vengeance. Spring, summer is always notorious for selling. But if there's no stock coming on and people want to buy in those times, it's going to get harder and harder in prices. And then obviously rates come down 0.75. We spoke about you going up an extra 100, 150 potentially on a $1.1 million. Yeah. So you expand that even further out, you're getting more borrowing capacity.
Yeah, 10 to 15 times, like 10 to 15% more.
Yeah. And that's on 1 mil. So then you start to factor that in even further, and the firepower becomes bigger and bigger, and maybe that gap hopefully starts becoming closed, but I don't see it. I think it'll be blown further away because it's the same dilemma. We don't have enough houses. Like that's essentially where we're at.
Yeah, it's funny because it feels really doom and gloom, but it's also so positive as well for so many people. And I think it still comes right back to the point of, if you're thinking about buying a property or you're in the process of it, you need to know your finance, and you need to most likely seek a buyer's agent that's willing to be able to help you through that process.
Oh, massively. It's getting as much information as you possibly can, and sometimes you're not privy to that. And that's the hardest part for a lot of people. It's and like, I feel sorry for some real estate agents as well, because they are under the pump. Like, you've got one property, you've got 110 people coming through. That buyer, you used to be able to create a really good connection. They still do. Like, there's some really great agents that I work with, but you're dealing with 110 buyers that are frustrated. Like, they are copping it at the moment, and for them to build rapport and to get that information, they just can't at times. So you're factoring that in as well to the market, whereas before, like, it's such a difficult landscape, and it's probably why buyers agents are coming in more, because if they've been in the market and you've got the relationships, you put yourself ahead of the queue. And that's what's happened in Sydney and Melbourne. Like, in like a couple of suburbs, there's 6 buyers agents in that area, because you need the help, and it's getting to a point that you can't do it yourself. And I think that's the process that we're building towards. It's just, Perth's always 10 years behind the 8 ball, as we know.
It always is. So rounding out today, I'd love to know where you think will be in this time. Well, let's call it the end of the year. How many properties do you think will be on market, and what do you think will be the average sale time per property? So we can go back in December and look at it and go, you're bang on.
I think in spring, if we give ourselves like spring, summer, maybe like 5,500, I think there will be a majority of investors selling, which will, because that's a more favourable time for them to sell. So I think the market will be propped up, but with investment stock. So the mums and dads are going to be buying it. How much do I think the market will go by in that sense? It depends on quality of stock, but you're probably looking, if we're going down by 0.75, it's probably another 10%, 15% of market growth in that. And how many medium days? Or I reckon it'll probably drop. I reckon it'll probably go to like 10 potentially. Like, things are selling over the weekend quickly. You're probably aware of that. You're getting more calls on a Sunday more than ever. And I think it's going to become very aggressive, and I'll be surprised if it's anything else, because we're all building towards that. The traction's there, the runway is there, the confidence is just the only factor. I think there's enough confidence in the rates, but it's just understanding the quality assets. And if we get a few more quality assets, watch that price point jump up even further. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited. I still get amazed at whenever I've got a certain property in mind for a buyer in certain parts of Perth, and I send you a quick message and say, hey, Rowen, what do you reckon about this? And you know when it's sold, you know every little detail around it. And I go, oh, well, if there's anyone that knows about Perth property, it's you. So thanks for coming in again.
Thanks for having me.
I wonder what round 3 will bring us on the podcast.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Maybe we should do it, I don't know, maybe in Jan, I think, to see how it goes. And looking forward to seeing what the market does as well.
Yeah, me too. Done. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening and being a part of our community at That Backyard Property Podcast. We would love it if you could like, comment, or even share with a family member or a friend that might get something useful from today's episode. We can't wait to see you again next Tuesday.